treat for all of you. Today we are speaking to Dr. Erin Shannon, a psychologist who has worked with some of the biggest names in sports. Her job is actually to not talk to the media because of her high-profile clients, but she has been gracefully willing to sit down with us to let us know how tapping has made a difference in the lives of her clients. So welcome, Dr. Shannon. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first off, I want to hear a little bit about some of the teams that you've worked with and a bit about your background.
Well, my background is very traditional. I grew up in the Midwest, and I got my doctorate in clinical psychology, and really didn't hear anything about energy work or tapping or anything in allopathic medicine, right? That's all we studied. This is the traditional way to do it. Here's the disorders, here's how you treat them. And so when I started to be exposed to other forms of treatment, such as acupressure, acupuncture, energy medicine, I started to incorporate that in my work, and I started to see rapid results. And I felt like I would see people really healing on a deep level rather than just understanding and coping with problems. Right. And so for me, it felt wonderful to be able to tell someone, I can help you feel better in this first session. Because in traditional psychotherapy, for many cases, it takes such a long time to resolve an issue, if it ever does get fully resolved. A lot of times it's just, okay, I understand it, but it still gets me sometimes. Right. So once I started to incorporate those techniques, I felt like my practice rapidly shift from the traditional psychotherapy to more of these energy techniques. And tapping is definitely one of the first ones that I felt comfortable using in my practice because it's much more widely accepted in the psychiatric and psychological communities.
Right. Well, I know that you can't give us any specific names, but can you give us some examples of some teams that you have worked with?
Well, I've worked with NFL and NHL and MLB. My father was a Major League Baseball player, and so growing up as the daughter of an athlete, I didn't know any different. And so I think the one thing that is probably the most helpful thing is that when these guys come to me, I see them just for who they are. Right. And I think that that's a unique thing to children of athletes. I don't think very many people can really get that connection right away. Yeah. So I think that is helpful, and that gets you through the door. But you really have to show up with your A game every time because they're used to winning and winners. And so the energy techniques really speak to them because they want you to help them right now. And they're very kinesthetically intelligent. They're very smart about their body. They have to be. Right. And they've got a lot of people invested in that body. They've got nutritionists, and they've got strength coaches, and they've got position coaches, and they've got agents. And so you have to take all that in consideration, but really sit down and understand, okay, you're being sent to me because of a batting slump, or because you can't stop smoking pot, or because you are afraid to fly, or because you're coming back from an injury, but for some reason, why aren't you healing? So these are all the presenting problems. And underneath all of these problems, whether it's a simple phobia, whether it's an addiction, whether it's a repetitive injury that doesn't seem to heal correctly, whether it's a performance issue, there's always several layers. And if you don't get down to the deep layer and release it, it's just like putting a Band-Aid on it. And right. Eventually there's an infection in there. If you haven't cleaned out the infection, it's going to fester. And so slapping a Band-Aid on it won't help. And so I feel like EFT is a very rapid and simple way to get to a deep problem. So they might not want to talk about the deep problem, and they might get very upset that I would even suggest that they have
because they're coming to you because they're having
just
trouble with the batting, like just fix
yes.
this, right?
Just fix the slump. I don't want to talk about my mother. I don't want to talk about. And so when we start tapping on the slump, very rapidly, we get right down to the fear, the emotion.
So they naturally go there
Really
while they
fast,
do the tapping.
really fast. And I think most people do,
Yeah.
but I've seen a remarkable athletes' affinity toward it is so rapid because they are so tuned in to their body. So when I say, where do you feel it in my body? I feel it in my upper left quad. Okay. And what does it feel like? It feels like slightly like a tingling. It's not quite like a muscle pull, more like a tendon. You know, like they can tell you exactly what they're feeling. They might not be able to put the emotion on it, but once they relax and start to tune into their body, it's almost like the emotion just kind of
presents
itself.
Right.
And they do it once, they do one round, and they feel a difference. And that's all you need, because they really come, once you get their trust and once you make them realize that I really can help you, this is not just BS, and this is not just, okay, check the box, coach, I went and saw the shrink and whatever. I can help you get better. All they want to know is, can you make me better? Can you make me better one more day? Can I get back there one more day? They're so driven and passionate about that. If you can help them do that, you have loyalty.
Right.
And if you help one guy, the next day you get 35 phone calls from all over the league saying, dude, you helped my buddy, can I fly in? And so that's kind of how my practice went from a few athletes to...
Well, you made a really interesting point before, that they come with a problem, but that problem is really a symptom of something else. And I think as we learn more about tapping and do our own growth and our own personal work, we begin to notice that and go a little bit deeper. I know you can't share any names, but can you share a story about how someone came to you and how they went deeper and the shift that they had with the tapping?
Yeah, I think a really interesting one was actually a physical injury. Okay, so there was a football player who was very fast, and his job was to catch the ball. And he kept pulling a muscle, and he kept pulling the same group of muscle on both legs. And he went to everybody. He went and they checked everything from, you know, his mineral levels in his body. He was so hydrated, he was overhydrated, this poor kid. Mm-hmm. And so finally, when nothing else worked, someone said, go see her, because we don't know what she does.
You're the last resort, right?
I usually am. But I love that, because they kind of almost have given up hope and they're willing to try anything. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful state for a person to be in. They're very open. So he comes and he says, you know, I don't know what you do, and you know, but can you help me? And it's very obvious that he wants to get better. And so he gets on the table, and I'm doing my stuff, and we're doing the tapping to calm him down, and he starts crying. This is a guy who doesn't cry. This is not a crier. Okay? And he said, I haven't cried since I was 5 years old. And so, what do you think made you cry? I don't know. What are you doing to me? You know, I said, I'm not doing anything. You're just tapping and talking about, even though I have these, you know, bleep, bleep, bleep muscle pulls, I love and accept myself completely. And we went down, and within 2 or 3 rounds of tapping, it was something about his grandmother saying that, I don't want you to play this sport, because what if you get hurt and die? It would break my heart. And then that year, the grandma had a heart attack. Mm. And so this was his first big NFL injury. And to most people, it's like, so what? It's a muscle pull. Like, you know, that's not bad. I broke my sternum, 4 ribs, and my, you know, collarbone yesterday. But it really had not much to do with the actual physical injury. it was all of those emotions and messages that he got as a little boy, because he just loved his grandmother. And so the shame of pushing that down and somehow in his child's mind thinking that he somehow caused it because she didn't want him to play these sports and he wanted to do it. And once he released that, he fixed his muscle pull, and he's never pulled again. And he was at a point where the team he was with had let him go, even though he was incredible, multi-million-dollar talent and great heart, and the city loved him. They let him go, and he was a free agent. So his agent says, go see this doctor. Comes and sees me, we do the thing. He goes, he tries out for another team, and now he's got a massive contract, and he had one of the best years of his career last year.
Wow.
And people had washed him up for done.
You know, I hear these stories all the time. I mean, this is what I do, is that someone has a physical problem, they tap on something emotional, and you see the transformation in the body. But I have to say, I still have trouble believing it, because it's not something we've been raised to believe. So I hear a story like that, and I'm still shocked, but we're seeing it over and over and over again.
And I tell you, I do it all day long, every day, sometimes 7 days a week, 6 days a week, 15, 16 hours a day. And so you'd think by now I would believe it, but every time and they're like, it's down to a 0. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
They're like, dude.
Don't lie to me.
Dude, it's gone. I'm like, are you sure? They're like, it's totally gone. And they'll stand up and like jump, and they'll be like, look, it's gone. It's not clicking. And it's shocking to me still, because, and I think actually that the fact that it's so rapid and it's so on the surface technically simple, that it's hard for the medical community and the allopathic community to trust it. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, look, I went to school for 24, 25 years of my life to study all these different ways to try to get at these symptoms of these complex diseases caused by genetics and environment and all kinds of sequelae of events. And I can tap a couple points on somebody's head and they get better. It's almost, it almost makes you feel ridiculous for going to school that long. Like, what was I doing? I love the fact that I went to school and got the background that I did, and I think it helps me
definitely
as a tapping helper.
Right, I mean, it gets you in the door, because again, if you're just someone that's good at tapping, it might be a little bit more difficult if you don't have the degree.
It helps with credibility.
It definitely helps,
and it helps me understand a framework. Mm-hmm. But every technique that I've ever learned, and any medical doctor will tell you that there's no medicine that works every time the first time for everybody without side effects. There's just not.
Right.
The greatest of medicines, somebody's allergic to it. It doesn't work for somebody. They need 2 rounds of it. It causes this side effect. I can honestly say that every time I do tapping with anybody, it works.
Yeah.
And that's miraculous to me.
It is. And I do want to make a point that people see the shift right away, but also sometimes it does take a few sessions, right? I mean, sometimes there's the quick fixes.
There's shifts.
And then sometimes there's like, you have to keep going to make these different shifts as I think you're personally ready to make that shift.
I agree 100%.
Or you just get clear on the problem.
It's layers.
It's layers,
right?
Yes.
And sometimes you will start around and all of a sudden just fall down 6 layers and get to a big root problem. Mm-hmm. But that's because you're ready, right? Or you're in such a state that you have to. But people will come in for a certain issue. They'll tap through it. They'll realize it's really a whole different issue. They'll get symptom reduction, but then they'll realize, but I want to work on this too. And so then we're tapping on something else.
Comes up, yeah.
And it's just like when you do energy work, you follow the energy, and tapping really follows the energy of the person. And for me, the biggest reward is to hear about my guys teaching their wife to tap or their kids to tap or telling the coach about it, and all of a sudden the coach wants the whole team to know how to do it, and all of a sudden somebody's off Ambien because they don't have to use it to go to sleep. They can tap and go to sleep. And Those kind of stories where the empowerment of the person occurs and they say, I can do this too. Yeah, it's not just my hands that can do this. You can do it. And for them to do it on their own and see it work, I mean, that's my job is to make them not need me anymore. And so that's a beautiful thing to see.
There might be some athletes watching this, or just some people who are weekend warriors who, want to have been having a problem with their golf game or having an injury over and over again. So I think the big takeaway from this discussion is also that it's not just about focusing on the injury, but also on the emotional aspects. So when you work with someone, it might not, like it had to do with their grandmother, it had nothing to do with the actual physical injury, but something else. And I think that is fascinating and something that we have to continuously talk about so that we train our minds that when we have, as we're having a problem, that we look a little bit deeper to see what's going on that's really suppressing our ability to heal and recover naturally.
And I think that athletes, any athlete, weekend warriors, people that played in college, or professional athletes, they're very connected with their bodies in a lot of ways, but there's also this disconnect when they have to push through the pain or when they have to push themselves beyond something or push through the wall. And so a lot of times that pain suppression mechanism, it goes for physical pain, but it also then starts to suppress emotional pain. The emotional issues of many athletes get sublimated, or the energy. Say, for example, an NHL player told me one time, if it wasn't for hockey, everybody in the NHL would be in jail because we get paid to, beat the crap out of each other. So that's an example of how this type of personality can sublimate that onto something that is, societally appropriate, right? But they have to use so much energy within the sport that a lot of times they don't have the energy to work on the other stuff.
On the relationship, on
exactly. So that is something that maybe a college athlete or a professional athlete does. So for people that are weekend warriors, it's an outlet, right? Like we work all week and we feel like, oh, I just need to get out and just run or just play some football, so it's an outlet for energy. But again, that's great, and everybody should have outlets, creative and physical outlets for the energy. But if we're using things to avoid or suppress, then eventually it's going to get us. Either we're going to hurt ourselves, or we're going to hit some kind of a mental block or wall, or something's going to happen in our life, our relationship, or whatever. So the great thing about EFT for athletes is that it helps them identify the emotions in their body because they know their body if they're an athlete. And so, wait, I have this tension, this tightness in my pit of my stomach. Am I worried about something? What am I worried about? And they start to be able to realize what's going on before that worry ends up causing a problem and now they're drinking every night. Or, the insomnia, I gotta go to sleep, I got a game tomorrow, I gotta go to sleep. Instead of going, man, my chest is heavy. What am I thinking? Gosh, I keep thinking about something, it's upsetting me, and then they think about it, they release it, and they can sleep. Doesn't mean the problem's gone, it just says, I'm gonna put this problem right here on my bedside table.
Power of awareness.
And I'll pick it up tomorrow.
Yes.